Hi, Joe Cerrone. Welcome to CAD 134, Basic AutoCAD for Interior Design. Today I'm going to go through and cover Chapter 5, Command Sets, Working with Your Drawings. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go through these learning objectives, measuring distances and angles, measuring radiuses of arcs, obtaining information about an object, creating round, beveled, and sharp corners, move, copy, rotate, and mirror images of objects. We'll look at the array command, the copy command for both polar and rectangular. Okay, so getting information for your drawing, a couple of different ways as far as working with these inquiry commands, and they're under the measure command. And so as we take a look at these utilities, what I would need to do would be need to be into a drawing. And so I like to use the architectural title blocks, and so I'm going to go into D2L and under content, I'm going to scroll down to find the arc templates, and then I'm going to download this B-size architectural template. I'm going to open that with AutoCAD 2022 rather. I think it's 23. And this just gives me a frame to work on within my drawings. And so remember that paper space has this little right triangle in the lower left-hand corner. It's basically a frame for our drawing. And then this is a viewport that will display whatever we draw in model space. Switching back over to the textbook. So we have these utility commands, and here's our measure command. And so we're able to measure things like distances, radius, angles, and volume. And so it has us go through and create a line. It's 5 inches long at a 45-degree angle. And typically what I'll do when I go to set these up is under Tools and Drafting Settings. We don't necessarily need Snap and Grid for this, so I'm going to leave those off. Polar tracking we want, so we're going to enable polar tracking. That's that green line. And then for object snap, I don't think we need it right now. I'll leave it on, but right now it's enabled for endpoints, midpoints, center, extensions, a couple other things. And then if I draw a line, if I start, I have the direct distance, meaning that you can see the cursor and the prompts follow the cursor. And so if I track this out to the right, it tells me it's drawing a line, tells me the distance of that line and the angle. And then as I move that line, I can move it up to 45 degrees, and then I can draw a line. And I'm just going to draw one 3 feet. And then I'm going to hit escape, zoom in on it. And then we can analyze these different lines with these utility commands. And so we can go through and we can measure things like angles. I think I need 2 lines here to actually measure the angle. So let's draw one more. And see, that's how the polar tracking works. If we look at the tools for drafting settings, and we look at polar tracking, I have it set up to be incrementing in 5-degree angles. And I typically have it on 15 degrees, so I'm going to bump that up to 15. And then it works like a drafting machine. If you've ever drawn with a hand drawing drafting machine, the rulers increment in 15-degree measures, and I'll okay that. And then if I want to measure something, I can go in here to my measure command, measure the angle between this line and this line, and it'll tell me that that is 45 degrees. And so that's what that's going for. It's basically telling me how I can analyze my drawing without having to go through and put dimensions on it. You could certainly put a dimension on it just the same, but then you have one more step to go and erase that dimension after you put that dimension on there. But a lot of people do that anyway. Okay, we can also measure distances. So for example, if I had to measure the distance between two lines, I can measure those in much the same way. We just created that construction right there. We can measure radiuses. We can measure angles. And so if I had another line, or let's just draw a rectangle here, and I wanted to measure the distance, I could go to my utilities, measure distance, and then I can measure the distance from here to here. And we can do that with grips as well. That'll give us the distance. We can do other things like measure the area. Area is a very useful command for figuring out square footage of things like flooring. And so we could go through and we could say measure area, and then we can go and grab the corners of this rectangular shape, and then we can hit enter, and it will calculate the area. It gives us the area in square inches and square feet. And if we have a floor plan, we can go through and measure the area of the floor plan and then calculate our flooring costs. Just some more constructions as far as working with angles. I think it's pretty clear as far as just going through and clicking on those things, using the measure command to get these different values. As interior designers, we're not really going to do a ton of analysis like that. We'll calculate out square feet, we'll measure door openings, make sure the furniture fits and things like that. The list command will give us more database information about something. So if we just type in the word list, and then I select an object and I hit enter, then it gives me that information. It tells me that this is a LW polyline. It's on the layer wall. We're drawing in model space. And so it gives me quite a bit of data here. It also gives me the square inches and the square feet. So it's just another way to analyze drawing entities since they're vector-based and they all have mathematical formulas associated with them. When we create fillets, fillets are a great command. We're putting these rounded edges onto our geometry, and the fillet command is located under modify, and here it is under fillet. And so if I click on the fillet command, now before I do, let's measure this and get an idea of how much I want to make a fillet out of. And so this is about 12 inches by 1 foot. And so if we put a 2 or 3 inch fillet, that would be fine. And so if we come here to the fillet command, we're in the pick mode, and you know you're in the pick mode because you have a small square there as your selection device. And then if I hit the down arrow, and this old computer of mine doesn't seem to want to do that, so I'll just choose it off of the command line. I can go and I can select the radius, and I can type in the radius, and so I'll say 3 or 3 inches. And now I'm in pick mode. I can go and put a 3-inch radius on that. Then I can right mouse click and repeat the fillet command and continue to place these fillets. You have different modes within the fillet command. You can have multi-fillet, which means I don't have to keep going up and selecting the fillet command to create those fillets. And I believe they talk a little bit about that in the chapter. And so when we go into the fillet command over here, we have these different options, and they'll show up here. Units, undo, polyline, radius, trim, and then multiple. And so multiple would allow me to put multiple fillets on. If I had like some geometry like this, and I didn't want to keep getting the fillet command, I can go to fillet, and then I can go to multiple, and I can go and put in multiple fillets without having to go through and reselect the fillet command. And that's by default. Some of the other options that they'll talk about are the trim and no trim options, and so when we go into fillet, we have these other options. As far as trimming goes, we can trim it. If we say no trim, then it puts a fillet in there and leaves the construction lines that were originally there. Most people never use this. Continuing. You can fillet between different circular shapes as well as other things, depending on if the calculations will work out. It also talks about the construction and which lines to pick to create the fillets. Let's see if we can create a fillet between two circular shapes. And it's a little tricky sometimes because the radius has to be within the specified amount to create that. And so let's see if we can make this work. Fillet, and then we'll say radius, and we'll choose something really large like 1 foot. Enter, and then I'll select this geometry and that geometry, and we'll get that fillet shape. If we're going to go and work with pick locations, what they're talking about here is if we have two lines, I'm just hitting the space bar to make it enter to terminate the command and then restart the command. The choice of what I pick chooses which radials I will get. And so if I go A to B, I'll get this. If I go B to C, I'll get this. If I go C to D, I'll get that. And if I do this with no trim, then I won't have to worry about the geometry being trimmed. So I'll say no trim, and then I'll say radius because I'll need a smaller radius. I'll go back down to my 3-inch radius. And then if I go from A to B, and then if I go repeat, if I go from B to C, so you go to the adjacent or kitty corner. And then they do the same thing with the circular radius. I don't think there's any reason to go really and do it again. And so we'll just continue on. And so they're filleting, and now they're looking at creating a fillet between a circular geometry and a straight line. And so you can do that. So if I have a line that comes out from the center here and maybe goes back, if I wake this up to that center, waking it up would be hovering over it, and if you have O snaps on, it'll wake it up and look for geometric relations like endpoints, center points. And so if I go through and I want to fillet between this circular geometry and this straight line, it will do that. If I turn the fillet trimming on, so I say trim yes, and then I go through and fillet it, it will cut the circle as well. Well, maybe not. But you can always trim it the old-fashioned way with just the regular trim command, and then as long as the geometry is between bounding object shapes, you can trim that out. Continuing. Chamfer command is like a relative of the fillet command. They both work kind of the same. And so I believe in some of the drawings we'll have some geometry where we'll have like a rectangular shape, maybe it's a table, and then they want chamfered corners on it. And so we could come over to our tabletop, and then it's under the arrow here for chamfer. And then what we do is we set up the distances. And so the default is 2 inches in this title block, and then the second line is 2 inches. And so we'll leave that the way it is, and then 2 inch, 2 inch, let's do those with trim. And so again, when we chamfer, when we go to trim, just like in fillet, we can turn trim mode on. And then if I wanted to go through the distances, they don't have to be the same. So I could say 2 inches for the first line I pick, and then 4 inches for the second line that I pick. And then you'll notice that the first line will be 2 inches shorter, and the second line will be 4 inches shorter. And so this second line I picked 4 inches, first line I picked 2 inches. And then I can repeat that chamfer, and it'll remember the last chamfer values that I had set. So that's the chamfer command. And then as we continue on, they just go through some more examples, a lot of words to do something visually very simple. They're looking at using the move command here, the rotate command. And so the rotate command is this little circle with an arrow on it, and we're going to look at, basically we're going to look at modify commands. So they're looking at these modify commands over here. You have move, rotate, there's trim, copy, mirror. We're just using the fillet command, and we'll use the array command as well. So let's go through and do a demonstration on that. And so they make this X with a circle, and then what they want to do is they want to move the X to the circle. And so we can kind of move over here, and we'll draw our X, escape, right mouse click, and then they draw a circle, and then they want to move, and it doesn't matter if you move the circle to the X or the X to the circle. Technique is the same. It's 3 steps. 1, you click the move command. 2, you select the object to move. 3, you hit enter. 4, you hit the point to move it from. And then 5, where you want to move it to. So I guess it's more than 3. But it's that same technique as far as being able to move something. You have to choose the move command, then you have to select the object, and then you have to tell it you're done selecting objects. And so that's the thing about selection sets. If I wanted to move this back, I select move, I select those 2 objects, and then I could add more if I wanted to. If I accidentally select the circle, I can unselect it by holding the shift key and then selecting it. Now it's unselected. It tells you it's removed from the selection set. And then I'm done selecting, so I have to hit enter, tell it I want to do the next thing, which is specify the base point. Where do I want to move it from? And then the destination point. Where do I want to move it to? When we work with the copy command is modal. It'll allow us to copy these different objects. And so I could go through and I could move this back. We'll just undo it. And then if I wanted to copy this object, when you go to copy it, select the object copy, step 1. We could add more objects to the selection set. To end the selection set, I'm done picking what I want to copy. I hit enter. Where I want to copy it from. Mouse is glitchy. Where I want to move it to. Where I want to move it to. And so copy lets you keep copying until you terminate the command by hitting escape, right mouse click, or enter. The rotate command, as we look at the rotate command, what they're doing is they're talking about how to rotate different objects. And so they come up with this scenario of rotating this object around a point. I'm not sure if I can make this construction work exactly the way they do, but I'll give it a try here. So they have a line here like this, it goes like that, it goes like this, escape, circle, post snap to the endpoint, create that circle, and then they're rotating it. And I'm not sure how they're rotating it, if it's 0.1 to 2 to 3, but what it works like is this. You say rotate, select the object to rotate, and then you hit enter. Then you select the base point. Where do I want to rotate it from? Right here. And then as I move the mouse, I can then move it onto the line like they did with that. And since my polar tracking is on, it moves and creates these lines in those 15-degree increments. And so it's easy. It's like working with graph paper as I work with these different rotational aspects. You can also use rotational aspects with coordinates, like rotate this 45 degrees and at an angle, but we'll continue on because we don't do a ton of that. Most of our work will be visual, like I did right there, where we'll select the object, point of rotation, and then we'll rotate it. Mirroring is just making a mirror image of the object. You know, they basically just draw a line and they mirror the objects that we've created about that line. So for example, if I were to create a construction line, and this is just a regular line, I call it a construction line, but same thing. Mirror, select the objects to mirror, hit enter, I'm done selecting. Use OSnap, select the first point of the mirror line and then the second point of the mirror line. Use an OSnap. Do I want to erase the source object? No. If I say no, it mirrors it. If I say yes, it flips it. And so you have two options within that. The array command allows you to create rectangular or polar arrays. Rectangulars are square, polars are circular. And so the array command is a smart command. It works with the ribbon now, and it allows you to use grips to create these rectangular arrays. And so as we go through and create these arrays, what they do is they create a square, and then they create a rectangular array of those squares. Now, when you work with the array command, you want to have a kind of an idea of what size you're making things so you know how to specify the distance. So if I draw a square and I draw this, let's say 1 foot by 1 foot by 1 foot, and close that. I'll just type C. That's my object to array. And then when I go to the array command, you select the object to array and you hit enter. And then you'll get this smart board that'll come up here in the ribbon, which will ask you how many columns and how many rows. Columns are vertical. Think of columns that hold up the ceiling. Rows are horizontal. And so I have 4 columns and I have 3 rows. And then the distance between them is 1 foot 6. It just made that up by itself. But you can go and you can grab these grips and you can extend them out and create these rectangular patterns. You can then change things like the distance between them. Let's say I wanted 1 foot 3 inches between the rows, and if I wanted to do the same between the column, 1 foot 3. And so you can modify them like that. Once you get them the way you want them, you can hit the green check mark. These are associative, meaning it treats them all as one. Sometimes you have to explode them to break them out of that. And I guess I didn't have associativity on because it's not treating them as one object. If I were to array it with an associative, which I'll do when I do a polar, you'll see how that option works. And so that's the array command, and they just show you 9 different ways to show you different options within arraying it. But essentially, when we go through, if it was an associative array, you can go back and edit it and modify it, but nobody really does. If you're going to go and put chairs in a classroom, which I do all the time, I will sometimes array the desks and the chairs into the room to see how many seats I can put into a classroom. And then if you're doing things like chairs at a wedding where you have a table and then you have a chair around it, we could do something like that where, let's say I've got a table like this, and we'll say that the table is 3 feet radius, which will make it a 6 foot diameter. And then if I were to insert a chair, I don't know if I have any chairs, so I'm just going to draw a rectangle to simulate a chair. What you want to do when you create the geometry for something like that is you oftentimes will want to make a construction line so that you can center that. And I'm just going to do it by eye, but if I was wanting this to be perfect, I'm charging a lot of people for dinner at this wedding, and then I would draw half of it and mirror it. But so this would be a chair, and then let's make that a little bit bigger. One command they didn't talk about was the scale command, and so the scale command allows us to create something that's larger, and so I can scale this. It's the same technique. I select the object to scale, I hit enter, I give it a base point. Try it again. I chose stretch, scale, select the object to scale, hit enter. Base point is where it's going to grow from. And so it'll grow from that point right there. That looks good enough to be my chair. And then what I'll do is I will array that object with a polar array by selecting polar array. I'll select the object to array. I'll hit enter. I'll select the center of the object, and then it'll create that polar array. And then I can see, all right, I have 6 chairs. Let's see if I want to change that. Can I get 7 people at that table? Can I get 8 people at that table? Can I get 9? Looks like I can get 9 people to a table, maybe 10. Everybody can sit with their as couples, although it would be a little bit. And if I make it associative and I green check mark it, then I can click on it again and I can modify it. So I can come back here and I can go and change like the angles and other aspects of that command. And so they have us do this teardrop design and then array that in much the same way. And for the sake of the class, I'm going to I'll do it. Got a meeting coming up. So what they do is they draw a circle. I'm not going to create this at a scale. I'm just going to make it by eye. And then what they have done is they'll create the geometry for that. It's best, instead of drawing arcs, to draw circles. And so I can draw a circle like this. And then what I can do is draw a line from this endpoint. And if I hold shift right mouse click, I can go tangent. And then I'll do that again. And then I can trim this out. And then they just use the polar array on it. So we see polar array, use a blue window so I only get the petal of the flower. I'll hit enter, select the center of it, and then I can go and dial down from 6 to 4 the number of items that I want to array. All right, so that's a quick review of the Chapter 5. I'll post this recording, and I'll see you online for the next video.